right. I'm Joel Gunderson.
I'm Adam Rack.
And this is Winesplained, a podcast that tries to answer all of the tricky questions that we've received over the last decade in regards to sustainable wine. Today we have with us Phil Kramer, the winemaker for Cooper's Hall and owner of Alexeli Vineyards.
You really cleaned up today as well. This is
I
not the
thought
wine
you wouldn't recognize me.
Yeah. And today I think what we're gonna launch into is whether or not it is actually ethically viable to produce wine.
Or is what's the other one we came up with? Is sustainable winemaking a hoax?
Is sustainable winemaking
Oh my goodness,
a hoax?
hoaxes! Don't you hate those?
Yeah.
I mean, I keep thinking about aliens, lizard people. What else is a hoax these days?
Yeah.
Just a little bit of everything.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. But I think one way to jump in to the discussion would be for you, Phil, to give us a little bit of your background. And I think some of the last conversations we've been having is what I can only equate to a sort of crisis of faith.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I think it's a fair.
You've been building a particular life for yourself, and now you're coming to a point where you're wondering, is this a good and justifiable way of living?
Yeah, I mean,
So how did we get here? Where did you begin, and how did you get here?
so I have a background of engineering, product design, and then into, I guess, urban design. You guys know this, I think.
Yeah, I came across your sketches.
And I did that for a very short while. I mean, through college. But during college, I did agriculture with Cornell's extension program in upstate New York, working on various plots, different farms growing different things in different kinds of soils. So from a corn farmer, farming traditional or conventional ways of doing corn in very sandy soils, to running a plot on a biodynamic farm doing cucurbits, which are like zucchini, squash, cucumbers, stuff like that. And then, so that was my start in agriculture, really, was doing that during my engineering school in New York. Some city life from there, and then my brother and I wanting to find a place in Oregon where he had been for a long time. And we found the place we're at now with this rundown, disease-filled vineyard that was never really managed well. And it was a steal for what it was. It's like, well, I didn't know anything about grapes.
Right.
And I was like, this is a cool challenge. I mean, I want to live a country life where I can go, live season to season and be quite a bit more in tune with the outdoor environment, essentially, or be more part of an ecosystem than something that's always fighting it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the last 15 years, that's truly what has happened. Like, I truly feel like I'm part of the ecosystem of our 61 acres.
Yeah, so you have 61 acres. You're located in the eastern Willamette Valley.
Right. We might call them the Cascade Foothills.
Calling them the Cascade Foothills. We don't have an AVA up there yet, so.
No, and there would be no reason to. There's not enough.
Well, we can make a reason.
Sounds like another meeting, man.
You have to leave the property.
We'll get you on a wine board.
I was talking about ecosystems.
Yeah. And hoaxes, right?
Right.
Yeah. So you're up there in this ecosystem. You're in between Molalla and Silverton out there, tucked up against the Cascade Foothills, and you've been there for 15 years now. You're saying?
Amazing.
And
retraining this vineyard, cutting down trunks, 6-inch thick trunks that are almost 40 years old or more. What are they, 42 now?
Or more?
Yeah.
44?
42. I'm 44.
1980, 79 through 81, right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
A little bit in 82. And they're all own rooted,
Right.
half of them, we have quite a bit of crown gall. So we have an infection that is untreatable.
Okay.
But I manage it through having multiple trunks, being very careful with cuttings and everything like that. And there's a million benefits to that vineyard, you know. Like,
and you farm sustainably, right?
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean,
I can say that confidently, but I get into these semantic debates about what is sustainable.
Right. Yeah.
It's a loaded term that anyone throws around, and it pisses the fuck out of me. So.
Fair enough.
I mean, that's exactly why we're here.
So wait. So how many acres? I just want to I want to get a picture of this property that's kind of been like you're kind of inseparable from it, right? At this juncture, it's like,
yeah, in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't hardly ever see you off the property.
Well, yeah, that's true. You're not going to the hardware store.
Yeah, I'm not going to the hardware. Maybe if I went to the hardware store in Silverton.
Or the groceries, or the farmer's market.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. So for 2 hours a week, you're off property at either a hardware store, a farmer's market, or the Safeway.
Or a playground, or a trail with my kids.
And how much of the acreage is divine? So
less and less each year. Now I'm down to about 12.
12 acres.
By next year, it'll be around 9.5.
Yeah, I don't like to hear that. That's not cool. But
but it's necessary. I think it's necessary.
No, I'm just yeah. So as far as what you're managing, we're moving towards 9 acres to how many acres that are not set to vine?
Well, I guess about 53.
Okay.
54, 32, or whatever it is. Most of our property is riparian area at the bottom of the property, which is right in the middle. There's about an 8-acre lake with, seasonal flood creek. Markham Creek goes through there.
Right.
And it is probably my favorite spot on our property.
Right.
We have beavers that live there. They have a dam. And
right.
We, the beavers provide a lot for habitat, in terms of floods and controlling floods and everything, and keeping silt out of the lake. And but we have storks and ducks. And
so
storks, I don't know what they are. They're white and egrets, maybe.
Oh, pretty. They're big. Yeah,
they are beavers.
So I mean, like, realistically, most commercial producers would have walked onto your land when you purchased it 13, 14 years ago and done torn up those vines, right?
Everyone told me to tear up the vines and replant with, a VSP system, because that's what you do, put up a fence because that's what you do.
And that fence came down 5 years ago?
Well, I'm still taking it down.
Yeah.
Heidi and I pulled miles of 6 wires around the whole back, all, barbed wire and everything else. And it's kind of part of, I just, I get it that someone might buy a property with a loan from a bank and has to produce 3 tons a year minimum, maybe 5 tons a minimum after their 5th year, to make those payments or something. I don't know. I don't know that story. I don't ever believe it's less cases than most that the ends don't justify the means. And things like fences, things like shooting birds, and the many, many things that you can do to land that just doesn't justify, like, the destruction, basically, of an ecosystem. And so that's what I've been kind of trying to do with that.
And I think we've had countless conversations that are just hour plus long, where we, at the end of it, don't know what we're doing next. So part of what you've wanted to do over the past few years is really farm yourself. You're doing all of this work basically on your own, with maybe occasional help, which is not the common story, correct?
I don't know anymore. I know I spend 6 hours a day, 5 days a week in the vineyard at a minimum, pruning, laying canes, fixing posts, pulling leaves, suckering, canopy management, spraying, mowing. It's around, depends. I mean, it's like 12 to 20 minutes per vine per year. of human work or something. So I only have so many minutes in a day, and I don't really want anyone involved that doesn't want to be involved. I don't want to necessarily pay people who don't have an interest or a passion. I don't want help. I hate help. I hate the idea of help. I mean, help, another word we can define in different ways, but I'd assume just to do it myself and make less money. I mean, I took a pay cut to start doing this, let alone how it's panning out. But there's so many things that I get that you can't pay for. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I can ramble and get us off subject really fast.
No, that's fine.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah. So we started sort of backing up on our concept of sustainability since we started having these conversations a little bit more in depth. Because it used to be we were looking for live certification in all the fruit that we purchased, which your vineyard is live certified. Do you want to explain that a little bit for people who might not know?
Live certification is the best. So what it is you're signing up to be accountable for your record keeping. That's what live certification is. It's not nothing. There's sustainable aspects to it,
Right.
But you can have 500 acres of vineyard on 550 acres, and every now and then you have a patch of blackberries as your wild zone, and you do your weed survey, and then you can spray your weed killer, and you promise, you don't spray certain fungicides because, and only because, they're becoming
Right.
Ineffective because of resistance.
So there's a sense to at least this certification, and maybe you might say any sustainable certification, that is a little bit of bullshit.
Well, of course. I mean, it's made by people. So
Right.
even myself, I'm full of shit.
Yeah,
I
sure.
mean, the things I make are full of shit. What do you want?
Yeah.
At least I admit it.
Right.
And that's okay. There's a lot of power in telling someone, fill this thing out, take the time, be thoughtful, and don't lie.
Right.
And there's power there.
There's accountability, at least.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I don't think it goes far enough, obviously, but I partake because it's, I guess, necessary to run a business.
It aligns perhaps most closely as far as the certification process to the way that you would do it anyway. And now you're just bookkeeping.
Well, no, I'm just bookkeeping. And I honestly, it's also kind of sad that it's not sad. It's just to be lumped in like I'm live certified and so is so-and-so. But so-and-so doesn't really do anything that's sustainable.
Right.
And I just don't really like that. I mean, I'm not comfortable with that that bar. It's pretty low. It's a pretty low bar.
So you grew biodynamically. It sounds like at Cornell, or
one of the
a
farms
plot.
that was one of our places for the thing was a biodynamic farm. So
did you end up choosing live because it was the best option, or was it market pressure?
What else? Well, what else would I at that time?
Was there anything else?
Organics makes 0 sense to me. Organic is a pretty lofty sum for basically telling you what you can't do with anything, with nothing to be said for soil stuff, nothing to be said for like ground cover crops, really, and it's an arm and a leg. I mean, the cost, there's no point. Live certification, frankly, at least has something about having a certain amount of cover crop in terms of percentage of your vineyard floor, which is, I mean, if you have any bare soil for, let's say, this time of year, no matter what you're growing, I mean, that should be a goddamn crime.
Because it's running off.
Well, it's everything.
You're losing moisture in the sun. You're everything.
Just everything.
Yeah.
Everything from topsoil loss to the microbial activity in the soil to carbon sequestration to, I mean, even if you're a farmer and you have bare soil like that, I mean, what a waste of money. There's so much there. I mean, talk about nutrients. people are including biodynamic folks, they're still using gypsum, things for calcium and magnesium like dolomite or gypsum, or some lime to correct for some pH, changes and stuff like that. And so for all the purposes of nutrient availability, well, those are all cations, right? Or cations. Those are positively charged things, elements in the soil. And organic matter is the best for exchange sites for nutrients. So if you just rototill, let's say, your biomass or your roots every year, grapes get everything they need other than water, I guess, from the top 3 or 4 feet. If you don't have a perennial cover crop and you're just tilling it up, and even if you're like some very neat vineyard that looks very geometric and everything's perfect, and people come and think, hey, this must be good wine, these are some fancy looking vineyards, and it's like all I see is chemicals. And I don't know.
So you're 15 years deep into this project, into this sort of like experiment of seeing out a vision for yourself, right? That's where we are right now.
Hopefully. Hopefully I'm here.
I mean, you're here. I mean, so I mean, you're here and you're not here, right? Because even everything that, like, what it sounds like to me is that you're invested in this property. You see it as an ecosystem that you yourself have wanted to integrate yourself into, and actually, step, not causes more harm, maybe, and it almost seems like you're asking yourself, is this enough?
Yeah. So, that's why I've been kind of building alternative, like farm plans of sorts, and all the reading I've done over the years from like regenerative forestry and silvopasture and all these. There's a lot of buzzwords for all sorts of stuff, of types of farming. And I mean, talking about removing some of the vines, so that my thought process leads me to say, I'd like my goal to be is just that a certain portion of our property is just wild.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to limit ourselves to essentially these front, whatever, 10 to 15% of our acreage. And the rest is some place we go to. We might help, by spreading native willows along the banks of their creek, or putting in a hawk stand or something, little things,
Right.
help out. But really human managed to limit to a smaller portion of the property. And that to be like a benchmark. They say, this just, you got 5 acres, you can do something with 1 acre. But we have 60 acres, maybe we do something with 10 or 6 or 5 acres.
Mm-hmm.
The other idea, and what we started as a small project, is to grow other things that don't take so much. So like willow, we've planted a bunch of willow. My wife Heidi is very interested in weaving and doing stuff with different kinds of willow. Another idea is that I kind of started this year with some mushrooms on logs sourced from our place that I've chopped down to do that. So right now those are kind of in the educational realm,
Right.
Do 50 logs and learn. I mean, that's the greatest part about the entire lifestyle of living out there. The money might be kind of low, but good Lord, the education on a daily basis is incredible. Just learning my whole family knows the ins and outs of every aspect of the property, including every hawk and what they do and where they go and where to find salamanders, or where to find nettles, and where to find needles for the garden if we need some pine needles for something. Also, there's a million little things, million little relationships that I mean, then we can talk about that with the vines as well, but the property itself.
Like every time I'm out there, I feel like it is a very like picturesque life, but then we have to turn around and have conversations about where do we get our fruit from? Where do we source wines? How do we justify growing sourcing from your precious vineyard that's hand maintained, very low inputs from the outside environment to the rest of the world, which I think you could say just doesn't operate like that. Very few people are I'd say blessed to be in that predicament where you can say, well, I don't have to use all this property. So where's the line fall? What
I have
where
a
do we
kind of
draw
a
it?
mark. I think I'm a very skeptical. You guys know I'm a skeptical person to a fault, maybe.
Yes.
And I don't mind being rude because bad ideas don't deserve an ounce of respect. But I've always trusted, and so my circumstances are I live on the vineyard, and the things I do to the vineyard, I live with, and I breathe them in when I go to work every day, all day. My kids come find me in the vines on an almost every few day basis. They run through the vines to find me.
And the vines are what, 200 feet from the house?
Well, the closest, the Gewurz right there is 50 feet.
50, yeah.
Surrounding the winery, the small 1,000 square foot winery space. And so I've always trusted individuals or other vineyards similar to ours in terms of setup more than anything. Like Dwayne at Silver Falls, where we get the Gris and the little Pinot this year, right? Like he lives there. It's his house. It's like you're very comfortable going to the bathroom in a friend's house compared to the train station. Maybe that's a bad example. It's the first one that popped in my head. It's like, you don't really go, you're going to hold it. I don't want to go buy from some big vineyard where who knows about the labor they use, who knows what they're spraying, because nobody really is affected by that, Actually, that was a good example. That was a good example. Come on. Anyway, so I've trusted that. Matt King, we got that Gris from. Randy Gold, and you guys were just talking about. And I think I prefer that relationship. To buy fruit from people whose fruit is really a part of their life, to the degree like it is mine, at least at some amount. But.
I guess one of the things that we have to contend with, like particularly where you are in the valley, where a good chunk of properties are in the valley, is that if we are talking about sustainability, we're also talking about profitability, and the reality that if land is not profitable, then it will be turned into something
profitable. Sure.
Profitable. And I mean, we do have a lot of land use laws in Oregon that protect certain portions of a growing metropolis. But a huge chunk of the Willamette Valley is right on the edges of little towns that are now bigger towns, that are now small cities. Yeah. And if those, I guess, as we consider sort of like a come to like Jesus moment in whether or not wine is sustainable or not, there's also that counter argument that if we are not making wine on these properties, what are we making? Is it any more or less sustainable than, it sounds like obviously you have a plan.
Well, it's pretty
harebrained. It's a plan that you're living with, as you said, that you're living changing. With, and you're living through it.
I think the real point to that, a point of that is the idea of permanence, permanent things. We love to say things like leave no trace when we're on a trail.
Right.
But hey, let's put up 5 miles of barbed wire and then let it fall to shit because, and then there's 5 miles of barbed wire all around.
Right.
And it's like, I'm sure you guys have witnessed and had to deal with some of my repairs for things.
Yeah.
But I like repairing things, and I don't like very permanent things because they're not flexible. For instance, a subdivision with with a septic, like a
Right.
inline septic thing, and a farm which could be easily turned back into forest now has a mile of 3-foot septic lines and electrical poles and houses and all that. I think it comes back a little bit to what is sustainable,
Right.
And what is the most important thing.
Right.
Is the most important thing that there's enough new houses for everyone to buy? Or that if you can talk about affordable housing or making place for people to be able to afford a house that they own?
Right.
Is it more important to get to make it so that anybody who wants to can have the right to grow grapes or have the right to make wine at a price? Fruit should only be so expensive so that anybody and everybody can make wine. Is that a right? These are questions I have every day. I do, you say the word blessed. I do feel very fortunate. I mean, so often I have that feeling, especially when I'm really fucking cold and the wind's blowing and I never bought myself a proper rain jacket and I probably spend more time in the rain than anybody. I still feel very fortunate to have the relationship with our property and the amount of time I get to spend with my kids and my wife. So, but I think a lot of the sustainable stuff comes down to these strange balances
Mm-hmm.
that mean that there's compromises.
So are we just using the wrong language altogether? Like, is sustainability, like, is that just trash? Like, is that just like
It's
a shit
overused.
word?
It's become a buzzword.
Is it a shit word though? Like, does it even, because as you mentioned, like, you prefer things that aren't permanent, and maybe the idea of building permanence kind of plays into sustainability a bit too. Maybe we actually should be leaning into impermanence a little bit more.
Or
Yeah.
the alternative, should we be building homes and creating vineyards that can last for 100 years without a whole lot of inputs, without fixes and repairs and rebuilding and deconstruction again?
I think
these are fun. See, we're like, further we go down this conversation, the less we understand about it.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous. Something that's just like a sustainable thing. Everything has an end,
Right.
and we don't know about the beginnings of most things.
Right.
But we know. I think my solution for my own sanity at this point is to spend my time supporting diversity, not only in the creatures and the plants and the shit that's on my property, and not only that's on the property, but that's within the vineyard. So, it's great to have a stand of trees over there and a vineyard over here and your wildlife corridor over there. But really, they need to mingle. They need to get together. The second I got to the property, there was all these problems. And the second I got there, I stopped spraying things and killing everything. And a lot of the problems went away. New challenges came up. I had to do more handwork. And there was just not enough diversity. Everything was being killed.
Right.
So I think diversity, like everything, is so key. And that's like within the vineyard. There's some hazel from like native wild hazel bushes, I guess you could call them, to huge diversity of cover crop, perennial, there's a numerous native trees and things to incorporate, from cascaras and what is that one that I just got? English. What's the red berried one?
Black hawthorn?
Hawthorn. Black hawthorn is the native.
Yeah.
which are hard to find. Actually,
I have one. I just planted one last year in my yard.
Where'd you get it?
Friends of trees, everybody.
How many do you
Affordable
need
trees.
though? How many did you get? How many do
One.
they have? Okay.
It was $40. So
Yeah,
but it's a 10-foot tall tree. That was.
Is that sustainable?
Is that tree being planted? Yes. I don't know. It's better than grass.
Yeah.
So I mean, we have to have these conversations, like balance, and I think we're working out what that is for the winery in a larger sense as well. Like, what do we want to do? Do we have the time? Do we have the mental capacity to just produce more every year? Because we were on that path for quite some time. We were growing 25% year over year from the year I started up until pandemic. And I think Phil and I had this conversation that felt pretty shitty. It was great. Sales went up and we had more money and we were breaking even.
I mean, I liked all the cocaine and the parties. That was just like the high living.
I don't even remember those.
Me either.
We weren't invited, Phil.
I've never been in the cool kids club.
But like some of the other questions we started, once we have these refillable bottles available, is it better to put shitty wine or grown
Sourced
conventionally?
wine.
Yeah. That still, of course, tastes good because we don't.
Right.
That's another thing. If it's going to get thrown away, what's the point of doing it at all? But is it better to put conventionally grown wine in something that cuts carbon emissions just by matter of doing what it is, or the foundation of what we started on, kegs?
Yeah, I think it also depends on what the distribution network is and how far they're going. And honestly, I think the kegs are the best route because they're reusable. But I mean, there's for storage, for gifts, for a million different reasons, right? And yeah, better to put it in a reusable washed thing than into something else.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's a luxury fucking thing.
Yeah.
Right? This is not you can argue that you need wine. I mean, I don't. That's absurd. Absolutely absurd.
Do you need pleasure? But do you need pleasure of some sort?
Yeah, but you learn pleasure. You learn what to have pleasure from, I believe. I mean, there's obviously like biological things that are part of being a human that give you pleasure.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things that are learned.
Sure.
Taste.
Sure.
Where you grow up will probably determine quite a bit of what you enjoy eating. So it's a luxury thing that I've also before Cooper's Hall, I've always priced my bottles of wine when we had a tasting room to be something that was accessible. I thought at least.
Right.
We weren't making very much. I kept our Pinot at $20 retail.
Yeah.
Which is, it's not mass produced. It's like a handmade thing. So I don't know.
So we're at the end.
Are we?
We're getting close.
What does that mean?
And so the question is, we've gone through 35 minutes of struggling with this, and
well, everyone should struggle.
Yeah.
It's almost an impossible challenge to maintain any semblance of human modern living with trying to even come near a shred of what is sustainable.
So I guess here's my final question is it better to stay in the industry and stay in the fight and try to shape other producers by being an example, or is it better to walk away and do something else?
I think being a model is always a good thing. I don't know. Being a model is a good thing. Being honest about maybe compromises you make and holding yourself accountable. I mean,
yeah,
that seems reasonable, I guess.
Right.
And also calling other people out on their BS.
Right.
I don't know.
There's a lot of BS out there, so it's a hard job.
Well, it's really tough because there's 500 Pinots in the state or something ridiculous, and
people are tearing up the West Hills and the
an anecdote.
in order to
I've
turn
told
down ancient oaks in order to make more vineyards. Yeah.
I mean, the lady that did I tell this anecdote? The person in the tasting room came to me like maybe my second year into doing this, and she was like, "Oh, you winemaker." She was so grumpy, and I was like, "Man, this." I probably thought of a nasty thing to call her in my head, and she's like, "All those hills and." They used to be such beautiful forests. And I was like, man, well, now they're vineyard, they're plants, and people make wine, they do what they want to do. And now I just think about that woman, her attitude and her cynicism. But I agree with her.
Yeah.
I agree with her now. I'm like, you were right. Those were beautiful forests.
Yeah.
Screw those rich people and their vines that are probably just a tax write-off and
Right.
fulfilling some delusion of grandeur about having fabulous
Yeah, because
wine.
we all know that wineries operate at a loss. So you're right. They're just huge tax write-offs.
They're huge tax write-offs. So people get, they got to do something with their land. If you got a bunch of money, you pay to have a vineyard. And I don't believe a lot of people have the kind of relationship I would hope for, that would be required to.
We're building agricultural golf courses around the Willamette Valley. Agricultural golf courses.
Golf courses, that's arch nemesis number one.
Right, and that's what we're making.
I mean, but on the positive side, like there's hope, right? Like we're talking about tearing up golf courses where they shouldn't be in the first place. Or this conversation would have been even more loony than it is today.
But are we talking about tearing up vineyards where they?
No, we're still talking about planting more.
Vineyards are golf. I mean, vineyards are golf.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. The product is only accessible to a certain percent of the population. Even the most affordable, $20 for a bottle of wine, as accessible as that is, as cheap as that is, that you can afford to sell it for, that is unattainable for 90% of the population.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, yeah, most certainly. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people out there buying piss for $5 a drink, on a weekly basis, multiple times a night, but still, you're right. It is an investment to go to a tasting room that hand makes wine and spend $20 on it. That's what's inaccessible too. So,
well, let's go back in time a little bit. We have a 2010 Riesling in front of us.
I think we surprised you on this one.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, so this is actually, if I'm counting years correctly, you're 3 years into.
Yeah, my third vintage.
Yeah, your third vintage into your land here.
What did this like? This is fantastic now, especially with all this age. It's 12 years old.
Wow. So it's really round.
Yeah, so we have a 2010 Riesling from Alexeli Vineyard that we're sipping on here.
Yeah, in 2010, I was definitely keeping everything real cold and probably leaving about 0.3 to 0.5% residual sugar out of fear for the acidity.
Right.
To balance out the acidity, because these Rieslings come in at around 2.8, 2.9 pH. So, which is just like
ripping,
which can eat away your teeth.
And 12 years later, you're kind of stoked for that residual sugar right now. I mean, this is brilliant.
Yeah. Which is quite a bit different than what we're making now.
Right.
Now I let it get warm and just do whatever it wants to do.
Right.
Which.
So there's a way in which your winemaking is even mirroring your approach to the vineyard, kind of saying,
yes,
I'm going to try to do my best to stay away. Like
a comfort level with but
that's also confidence too, right? Like, I mean, purely. it's like if you know how to like get your fire hot and when to throw your steak on the fire, you're going to look like a pretty like confident cook, just throwing it on and not doing much. It's the same possibly with winemaking.
Yeah, I mean the confidence comes from experience, certainly, and there's a lot less prophylactic care of both vines and wines when you have more experience, I think, which also leads to less use of various, commercial products, like fining agents and all sorts of goofball stuff.
Well, you
Well,
came in.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, you came in with no wine training.
Right.
Right.
Zero.
First year, bought a vineyard, made wine.
Right.
So I mean, we just talked
Well,
about
you
this.
have to make wine.
Yeah.
You have to make wine or sell the grapes, and
So I mean, we did just talk about that with Christina, but I think on the flip side of it, not when you do have that education, your education is teaching that the opposite of that, right? For the most part, it's
whatever fits in a PowerPoint. Sure.
Yeah, it's this is the structure. This is when you hit your sulfur. This is when you do your fining additions. You need to do this, and that. The natural wine movement is vague, but generally try and move away from that. But I mean, that's just the same thing as just 12 years of winemaking and caring about not putting crap in. And
yeah, I mean, I've experimented continuously from different yeasts out of curiosity for different kinds of yeasts. You buy yeast to, I mean, I've been experimenting with making yeast in buckets in the vineyard since like the second year. This year we use only just yeast from the grapes. And actually it's much friendlier to the winemaker to just use the vineyard's yeast. So, there's no reduction, there's no over excessive heat. There's a pokiness.
Yeah.
But
it's still finished stronger than
finished
years past. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Winemaking certainly has changed in the last 15 years. I think it's become, winemaking is a very small part of the winemaking process. It's a very small portion of my attention. It's like 10% of what I do is do anything with wine. It's like a byproduct of the experience.
What you call it, caretaking.
It's stewardship.
Yeah, stewardship.
Yeah. It's like, it would be like the wine is like, I guess an example that doesn't involve bathrooms would be you wouldn't culminate my experience as a husband. You wouldn't explain or describe my relationship with my wife by starting about my children.
Right.
Like, that's, I don't know if that's a good example,
Sure,
but the vineyard itself, what it needs, what's happening, spending every day in the vineyard, working, seeing every vine. I see every vine. I drive past it. I walk. I tear the leaves off of it. I do the shoot thinning and the suck. I see every vine so many times, and there's so much to know. And you can't know these things without being there. You can't know what the vine does or what it needs or what the grapes are doing or what this vintage is going to be like or how to begin a plan for harvest and what style of wine or what it's going to do. And it's all in there. It's all in there doing stuff. And the wine is a small part of it. I mean, it's a great benefit.
Enjoyable part.
But
yeah.
I don't know.
So we have Chardonnay in front of us here.
I think these have always been something you've talked with a lot of care about your Chardonnay, right?
Yeah. I've spent the most mental capacity on the Chardonnay, I think. Getting this Davis 108 in line.
Right.
It's taken a whipping.
But this is also something that you might be pulling
I'm pulling a third of it.
Third of it out.
From the bottom of the hill.
Right.
I've never been that happy with it. It's cold.
Right.
It's cold down there.
Yeah, so that's that's something that you have. Maybe that's the love-hate of it. It's like you're okay to pull that portion out in order to focus on the portion that you love the most, I guess.
Yeah. I just don't want to waste. I just don't want to do things that I don't feel good about.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd rather, if we need fruit, I'd rather source fruit from somebody who's got some grapes that I like better than my own. That's fine.
Right.
This Chardonnay. What is this?
2018.
Oh, yeah. The Chardonnay is taken it's the smallest portion of the vineyard where this comes from, but it's the most of my time from extra. It takes twice as long to prune, with kicker canes and everything else. extra thinning, and
It's on a slope.
I got to walk uphill all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
God damn it. Just slog through life.
This is the story of your life.
Yeah.
No, it's the most challenging, and I think that's why I love it so.
Yeah.
Suffering. Don't you love talking about suffering, Joel?
Yeah.
I think
Of course I do.
without suffering, the wine. There's no soul.
No.
To this wine
Absolutely.
without some suffering.
No, the vine should suffer. We should suffer. That's where wine comes in. Actually, is because we do all in fact suffer, and we actually do need some respite. So I'm going to stick to that one. But thanks so much, Phil, for coming in. I don't know if we've answered whether or not sustainable winemaking is a hoax. I think
we forgot that part.
No, I don't think we did. I think we were talking about it the whole time. But yeah, thanks again, and
thanks for
always a
having
pleasure.
me.
Sure, we'll have you on again.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Happy to come down to the big town.
Oh, big city Portland.